Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns have lost three straight, including the worst defeat of the season Sunday to New England. Halloween is still almost 2 weeks away, but the season is on the brink already. Here to discuss it all with me, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Scott, I tell you, that was an ugly one. But before we get to that, and I'm doing well overall, hope you are as well. Before we get to that, though, just got to say, tough loss for the Guardians last night. But, man, I'll tell you, it was really fun following them and enjoying playoff baseball again in Cleveland and just some amazing wins against the Rays and the Yankees, taking them to a game 5. So just got to give them props. And I know this is a Browns podcast, but you know what I mean? It was a good ride.
Oh, it was. It was fun. I'll tell you what, I feel bad for my 93-year-old grandma. I don't know what she's going to do now. I saw her yesterday before the game, and she was all excited. You know, she keeps charts the wins and losses. She'll watch the rest of the playoffs because she's a baseball fan. But it's going to be, it's a long whatever it is, 4 months, 5 months until they start playing again. So it was a fun ride. Just wish it would have lasted a little bit longer.
Yeah, funny you say that. I stopped over at my dad's yesterday. He's 89 and he's super into it. You know, he kind of keeps score of the games, and my wife's grandparents are into it. A lot of people around that age group, they really get into Cleveland baseball, and I am, and all of us would love to find a World Series here. I mean, it's the longest drought in Major League Baseball, and hope one day it would happen. We were so close there in 2016, but I know it's a Browns town, but I will always say it's a big baseball town too. I know a lot of people don't believe it is, but I really think, people are wondering if people will show up. Man, that place was rocking for those playoff games. And but anyway, it was a good ride. I know a lot of people are disappointed Bieber didn't pitch. I'm fine with that call by Francona. I totally trust him now. I maybe would have gone bullpen game and not pitch Savali, but again, I'm not going to, criticize Francona because he's done so well.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's hard for me to criticize Tito, number one. And I think it took, you take a lot into an account, including the fact that, Bieber missed a bunch of time last year with an arm injury. And, I heard Tito on the pregame, and that's what it sounded like to me was that that was at the front of their mind with not pitching him on 3 days rest. And it's hard for me to argue with that. Now, you need Savali to throw a strike, mix in a strike in the first thing would have been nice.
Yeah.
But I can't blame it all on not having Bieber, and I think it's probably the right call. I really do.
Yeah, and I joked on Twitter last night, was Bieber supposed to hit as well?
Right, he scored 1 run. Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, and they didn't really hit in the playoffs at all. I mean, and you knew that 1 or 2 runs wasn't going to beat the Yankees like it did the Rays. So, you got to maybe get a bat in the offseason. Not maybe, you need to get a bat in the offseason and get a little more offense. But anyway, good to talk Guardians with you there real quick. And now on to, I feel better about them, even though they're eliminated the playoffs, than I do about the team that's still alive. I mean, but the funny thing is, and there's about 4 different ways I want to start. Before we break down the game, though, in general, if you really look at the standings, I mean, they're 2 and 4, right? And they're only a game out of first place. As bad as it is, their first place teams are 3 and 3, and you play both of those teams coming up. So as bad as it is, if you can somehow find a way to turn it around, you control your destiny.
Yeah, and that really is a saving grace. And, I know Kevin Stefanski tries to keep it, 1 game at a time kind of attitude, go 1-0 this week. But I'm sure that's going to come up, whether it's from him or the assistant coaches, or I know the players are saying that. Yeah, that's huge. And it does give you, if you're the team, it gives you, I don't know, motivation or hope, whatever, that it's still right there in front of you, right? As bad as these last 3 weeks have been, if we do X and Y, we're right where we want to be. So I think that's critical to mention, but I also think, though, I've had those conversations with players before, right? We still control our own destiny. Everything's in front of us. Those conversations are like November and December, right? Like those are late in the year kind of conversations. They're not October 17th when we're talking to Jack Conklin the other day, and he's talking about that, right? And you have to have a playoff mindset, and I think it just shows you how important this stretch is and how what a critical stage this season is at so early, right? And part of that goes back to we talked about it a bunch, right? The easy schedule at the beginning. You needed to take advantage. They didn't. The fact that you're playing with Jacoby Brissett and Deshaun Watson doesn't come back till December 4th, right? All these things meant you needed to get off to a good start because you have that target number in mind, or at least we do. I'm not saying the team does, but realistically, the target number is you got to get to 5 or 6 wins. You know, and it's not only for when Deshaun Watson comes back, but that's such a milepost, right? Is you got to get those wins. Like you have to have a certain number of wins to give yourself a chance at the end of the year, no matter who's playing quarterback. And if you squander them early, right, you blow leads in the fourth quarter, all of a sudden there's fewer and fewer chances to get to that number you need going into the last month and a half of the season. And if you don't get one or both of these wins against Baltimore and Cincinnati, then it's hard to that math gets a lot tougher. It just gets a lot harder to get to the 9, 10, 11 wins you're going to need to get into the playoffs. And it looks like in the AFC North, like you said, 3-3 is first place. So maybe 10-7 get you into the playoffs, right? Maybe that wins the division. 9-8 still feels like a stretch to me. But regardless, if you're 2-6 at Halloween and entering your bye week, then you got to go 8-1. Like the math just doesn't work. So these next 2 games are, you know, I don't think it's crazy to say that the season, you know, the balance of the season rests on these next 2 weeks to keep themselves in the discussion.
Yeah, it feels like you got to win both of them, no doubt. You know, leaving the sports department on the air, you know, I do the news now and I do sports in the morning as well, but I don't really have the format or the time to break it down or analyze it. But I was a little hard on a Monday morning just for a moment because I'm tired of the sound bites coming out of the locker room about how we can fix this. And just they're saying this. I'm tired of them saying they're going to do it. I want them to go do it, Scott. I'm tired of hearing the same old thing.
Yeah, I get that, Judd. I don't know, and I completely understand that. And I completely understand fans, you know, Kevin saying we're disappointed and frustrated every time they lose. I don't know what the better way to handle it is, right? I know fans want to see emotion and they want to see it really be painful to the guys, and maybe that's what feels like it's missing. Although, like I don't have any doubt that these guys are heartbroken when they lose. They're devastated when they lose. And I got a little bit more of that from Stefanski the other day. I know the quotes were pretty routine for him. You know, he threw in I know how bad that looked, or I know how it looked, I know how it felt, which was a little bit of a change up for him. But listening to it live, you know, and I sit in the front row of those post-game news conferences, it felt the same to me. But when I went back and watched it on video, like his face looked a little different to me. Like he was trying to convey that he understood how bad it was. And maybe that doesn't come across if you only hear it, right? Maybe it doesn't come across even if you see it, but you're not used to seeing him every day like I am. But I get what you're saying. I don't know what the perfect answer is for him or for the guys in the locker room. Maybe you just need to see more emotion, but I completely understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, the whole believe in the locker room. Yeah. That's what I keep hearing.
Well, I mean, what's he going to say? We don't have the guys to do it. I mean, then you're fighting with Andrew Berry, right? Like the season's not over. You have to. I think you do have to express some type of optimism, and you do have to express belief in your guys, at least publicly, right? Like, does it really do any good to come out and say Grant Delpit is terrible? I can't believe I got to play this guy at safety. Like that's. I mean, then we're writing about that. Like, I think he's in a tough spot. But I also think that Kevin's style, right, which is unemotional, even keel, kind of say the same thing over and over, doesn't give us great answers. I don't think that lends itself to, I guess, conveying how disappointed and devastated, whatever adjective you want, what a loss is, right? The fans feel it gutturally, and I think they want that shown from their coach. And that certainly doesn't come across because that's not really his personality. Does that make sense?
All right. Well, let me backtrack then, because yeah, you're completely right. I guess I don't really mean it as much from Stefanski, because you're right. That's you're going to get that from him, but I feel like you're hearing it from the players too. Hey, we believe in the locker room, one game at a time. It's the vanilla answers. Like maybe that's what it is. I want to see more emotion from them. Instead of telling me we believe in the locker room, tell me what you're going to do to change it, and why you can't change, why it hasn't been changed. I mean, listen, we're not talking about a team where the expectations were 2-4.
Right.
I mean, where they were supposed to be 4-2 or 5-1 right now.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. I really do. And I agree. I mean, you've been in a ton of locker rooms, Chud. There are those points where you get that guy, right? You get that guy, or more than one guy, who has a rant, let's say, after a loss. And we really haven't seen that yet. You get Jacoby Brissett addressing the team. I think his disappointment comes through, but it's some kind of high volume, or right, like it doesn't come across that way. Myles Garrett talks about, hey, I need to do more, blah, blah, blah. And, and I think Myles means it, but he's also coming off a game where he played pretty well. He had 2 sacks and a forced fumble. So it's easy to say I need to do so much better when you go, well, really, I don't need to do that much better. I just had a great game. You just are saying that. So I get what you're saying, and I do think that's been missing. And I don't know if that results in wins or losses or not. But certainly something needs to change, right? And I guess maybe your point is that if you saw a change in the reaction to a loss, maybe that would lead to a change in the outcome the following week.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, sure. I mean, I don't know. Just yeah, I guess that's what I'm wondering. Is you're right. I've seen that in the locker room before. You're right. I know we've talked about this before too, about what they're supposed to say as different from what sometimes they accidentally say, or the emotion. So you're right. I mean, we've criticized them before for saying something that they did in the heat of the moment. So I guess I can't really be hard on them for not saying it either. I guess I'm not. You know what? Hey, I'm human. I'm not going to be happy either way. How about that?
Yeah. I get that. I do. I get that.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and I don't want to get into the same answers that we've had, because we've talked about this before in Woods and the coaching staff and all this. But I guess, do you feel like this is a Kevin Stefanski problem? Is he not what we thought he was, or do you think that with time he can correct this? I guess I'm not asking you if you think he should be fired. That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, do you have confidence that he can turn this around?
It's a great question. I think I say yes still. And I base that on, I really do think he's smart. I think his plans, for the most part, are solid. And everything's well thought out, right? Like that I don't doubt. I don't doubt that he works hard. I don't doubt that he's smart. I don't even question his plan a lot of times, and we can get into that, whether or not they should run more, whatever. But like I think there's serious thought and preparation and a good reason for X, Y, and Z that he does. So if you have that as a backdrop, then I think if you given time, given the right players, given the right circumstances, if you're smart and work hard, then you got a chance to make things work. And I also think he did not, we've criticized his play calling or discussed his play calling, and we can get into that if you want. But overall, I think he's done a good job as a play caller this year, and even in his 3 years here. Like, I don't think that's keeping the Browns from being where they need to be. So, there's a couple levels to his job because he is a play caller. I think he's fine as a play caller. To me, the bigger question is, how is he, I guess, as a leader? Is he directing this whole operation? And part of it's going to be, how can he get these guys out of a tough time, right? That's leadership. Can he do it? Can he make the right big decisions? And you said, I'll get into Joe Woods, but real quickly, is firing Joe Woods the right decision, right? Like that's on Kevin Stefanski. And when you talk about everything that falls under his umbrella, he better make that right choice. And I'm not saying that fire him is the right choice. I'm just saying he better make the right choice because that's on him. So I haven't not who cares about my faith in him, but I'm not to the point where I say, man, this guy's not the right guy for the job. I get that there's starting to be that sentiment, and that sentiment is growing. I'm not there yet, but he needs to show some stuff, and he needs to show that he can get this team out of a tailspin, and he can weather these huge storms, which include his defensive coordinator being on the hot seat.
Yeah. I don't think I'm that good at Twitter, Scott. I really don't. I think I think there's people that are really good at it. They're comical, and if you don't take them too seriously, everyone kind of has a niche. Some people try to go on there and act like they know it all, whatever. But every once in a while, I'll put something out there and it will catch fire. It doesn't happen often, but I didn't even think it would when I wrote this, but I believe it. I just want to know your opinion because this got a ton of reaction. And I just simply wrote, the notion that the Browns will be a winning team when Watson comes back is not the layup many think it will be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw that one, Chud, and I really thought it was a good tweet, and it made me think. I think that's a great discussion topic because part of me says, well, they lost a game by 3 points, a game by 2 points, a game by 1 point. If you have such an upgrading quarterback, that turns those games into wins, right? And I think there's validity to that thought process. However, I know that Deshaun Watson isn't making any tackles on defense. He's not going to cover the tight end like Grant Delpit failed to do. He's not going to have, he's those miscommunications on the back end of the defense that we saw early in the year are not disappearing. So he's only one guy, right? And I know the quarterback has extra importance. I get that. And we've talked about it when we used to go on TV together, Chud. We would talk about, man, if they just had a quarterback, everything gets better. And that part's true. But I think when you look around the league and you see Tom Brady's 3-3, and Joe Burrow's 3-3, and Lamar Jackson's 3-3, and Aaron Rodgers is, I don't know what he is, 2-4, 3-3, and just got waxed by the Jets. It's not all about the quarterback. Now, I do think this team has talent and has enough talent to win games, right? We see them right there in games. I think they've gotten to the point where, and not last week notwithstanding, where they go into games and they have a good chance to win a bunch of games. And whether or not they do or don't depends on if they live up to that talent, how they play that particular game, how they play in the fourth quarter, how the ball bounces, turnovers, all that, right? But they've gone from having no talent to being on the same level as many teams in the league. So when you have that as a backdrop, then yeah, I think quarterback makes a ton of difference. And if Deshaun Watson plays like Deshaun Watson of 2020, he would make a huge difference. But I don't think it's as simple as saying if he comes back, they start winning. Because right now, and I think this is what you're getting at, I know you're getting at, it feels like the problems go beyond just quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, though, I think Kevin Stefanski deserves the shot to get Watson back and to play this out. Because I think we both know, and everyone knows that there's a culture with Haslam's and what's been there. And if they just turn around and were to revamp everything before Watson, like people want Stefanski fired now. They want Woods fired now. They want these things to happen now. But I don't know if it's fair to let the whole season play out and see how you look at the end of the year. Because Haslam pretty much changes maybe it's their failure to not realize they were going to be without him for as long as they were going to be. Right. Whatever the bottom line is, they've put themselves in this position.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And yeah, I do think it would be unfair to Kevin Stefanski. Not that the world's fair and the NFL's fair, but I do think it would be unfair to Kevin Stefanski to say, okay, you get Baker Mayfield for 2 years and Jacoby Brissett for 11 games, and we're going to judge everything on that. That doesn't seem right. And yeah, they knew Watson was going to be suspended. Maybe they misjudged that. Maybe they miscalculated by, relying on Brissett and not, going to get a Jimmy G or whoever else was out there. And that's another point we could discuss if you wanted to. But yeah, I think I think you're right. I think it's important to let Kevin Stefanski have some time with Deshaun Watson. Now, just having Watson, that might not cure those leadership issues if you think that Kevin Stefanski's issues are bigger than just the offense. But we focus so much on the offense with him because he's a play caller that, I think it's only fair for the guy to have, like a big time quarterback running his offense and see how it looks. I think, to me, that makes a lot of sense. I know you're right that a lot of people would probably disagree with that, and I know a lot of people want those guys fired now, but to me, that does make sense to give him time.
The defense, I mean, we continue to talk about it each and every week, and it's just I think each week it becomes more mind-blowing at how bad they are.
Yeah, it's pretty a good way to say it, and it's a pretty blunt way to say it, right? What to me, Chud, and I want to know if you agree with this. It feels like there's a new problem every week, and that is, number one, it's tough to watch. Number two, I think if you're a coaching staff, it feels like the target's moving on you all the time, right? Like, okay, we fixed communication, and all of a sudden we can't stop the run. Okay, we fixed stopping the run, and then we can't cover in man-to-man, right? Like, they played better against the run against the Patriots, and they knew the Patriots going to run it down their throats or try because they had a rookie quarterback. The Browns had given up 440 yards rushing the last 2 games. Well, so the whole plan was, all right, well, we can't let that happen. So they had a bunch of dudes at the line of scrimmage, right? They practiced tackling, and they were better tackling for the most part. I mean, Grant Delpit, throws his shoulder, and Jonnu Smith runs right by him on that 53-yarder. Maybe MJ Emerson misses a tackle on a 31-yard touchdown run, but he kind of got sucked inside. To me, it was less about the tackle on that play. The point is, they did better. They did better against the run. Like, they gave up 98 yards and 3-point-something a carry. That's way better. But in order to do that, then you had to leave your corners in man coverage and your safeties in man coverage, and they got beat too much, right? So there's something else new every week, and if you don't have like a tent pole, right, something you can rely on is, hey, this is what we do well, and if something else crops up, we'll figure that out. But we can rely on this. And it just doesn't feel like this defense has that, right? Like, you can't say, hey, we're a great blitzing team, because they're not. Well, you want to say you're a great man coverage team because you have Ward and Newsome and Emerson and Delpit's a second-round pick, right? Like, you go through the list, but they didn't look like a great man coverage team against the Patriots. And I know Denzel Ward didn't play. And for all the people that call out Denzel Ward because he gets hurt and because he has a concussion, you missed Denzel Ward on the field Sunday. I think he would have made a difference. Now, maybe that's just making their argument because he's not out there because he's hurt.
Yeah, that's the problem. He's like hardly ever out there.
Well, I mean, he plays like 13 games a year. That's not hardly ever. But that's the narrative out there, right? Like, he's never out there. But my point is, he's really good when he is, and I think that showed up. To me, that showed up a lot Sunday because Emerson's been good, but he wasn't good enough Sunday, and I think Ward would have made a difference. But you know what I'm saying? So, like, the defense, there's just nothing you can hang your hat on, and it's a tough way to live. It's a tough way to coach. And on top of that, you're in your 3rd year, right, with Joe Woods in this system, and it's 2nd year for almost all these players, and you wonder how that can be possible, right? Like, how do you not have, whether it's an identity or a strength, and it just doesn't feel they have one.
What was your reaction when Hunter Henry scored that touchdown? That was Henry, right? When he was that wide open.
Yep.
I can't even. I just shook my head, and I think I walked away. And it's just like, how does that happen? It just seems, what were you thinking?
Yeah, well, you get Grant Delpit matched up 1-on-1 with him because it's 3rd and 1. So you got a bunch of guys at the line of scrimmage trying to stop the run. And then he gets, I don't know if he gets locked up with Henry, kind of bumping him off the line of scrimmage, or Henry's, trying to block him like it's play action. And then he falls down. I don't know if he gets thrown to the ground, he falls, and you're wide open. And, you think, well, just don't fall down. And obviously that's part of it. But technique comes into that, right? Like, whether or not You have to be able to disengage. You have to be stronger. You have to have the right foot movement. Like, that's what these guys practice all the time. And I'm not saying guys can't fall down from time to time. It happens throughout the league. But I don't know if you can't fall down on 3rd and 1 when you're responsible for stopping that guy and it turns into a 31-yard touchdown. And you especially can't let that happen when you're Grant Delpit and you've given up. He's been involved. It feels like he's been involved in all the big plays this year. Whether or not they're all his fault, right? Like when Robbie Anderson runs by Newsome and Delpit, Delpit's there. When Corey Davis runs by Ward, Delpit's the other guy there. And against the Jets. He's on that 53-yard play because he doesn't make a tackle Sunday with Jonnu Smith. At the end of the game, they run the end around, and it's Delpit's guy, and he completely blows it. And the guy runs right by him for a, 19-yard end around touchdown. Like, I go back and I rewatch the game, and he made some plays. Like, he was better in run support. Like, he made plays at the line of scrimmage. But you can't give up, especially if you're a safety, you can't give up like 4 big plays a game. And it's kind of what Grant Delpit did on Sunday. And, it's kind of a bigger topic of discussion here, Chud, but you talk about Joe Woods and how responsible he is and whatever. This guy's a 2nd-round draft pick, and I'm not throwing the whole, all the Browns' troubles on Grant Delpit, but I think he's like a good example of them. He's a 2nd-round draft pick. Guys are talking about how he's a Pro Bowl-type player in the preseason. And then I think he's playing really poorly. And then it makes you question the talent evaluation and the talent acquisition. Right? If this guy's supposed to be a key piece of your defense and he's giving up big plays seemingly every week, then, is that a Joe Woods fault problem or is it an Andrew Berry problem, which is why this feels bigger than a 3-game losing streak. And, I know the NFL, everything gets exaggerated. The focus is so sharp. But it does feel like that, right? It doesn't feel like it's just an isolated loss. It feels like, oh my gosh, did they draft the right guys? Do they have the right coaches? And when you start having those kind of questions after week 6, that's when a season can go off the rails.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome analysis there. That really is eye-opening when you say it that way. I'm just sitting here and my jaw's kind of dropping. And then it kind of goes back to my tweet, right? About the deeper than just the quarterback. Boy, so that's kind of scary to think if you're a Browns fan. Now we're questioning the players that are on the field from the front office bringing them there. And then that goes back to what we've talked about the last couple of weeks that I always bring up to you about how this secondary acts like they're the best secondary in the NFL, but they're clearly not. And then you start worrying about, okay, then the coaches, and my gosh, I mean, that's a little bit scary. And I think I mentioned, I know I mentioned this in the predictions last week, is that I was really concerned, and a big reason I picked the Patriots, and we'll get to that later, but Bill Belichick, and they were just severely outcoached in this game.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I, you figure they would be, right? Because we saw what happened last year in New England, and it's Bill Belichick, right? So, like, I went into the game knowing that was a possibility, but I also know that, the Patriots are 2-3. It's not like Belichick just rolls out of bed and wins every game. And some coaches have good plans to combat Bill Belichick, right? And I thought that the Browns might have a good plan, and I thought they were more talented than the Patriots, and that didn't matter because you're right. I think they were outcoached to the degree where it didn't necessarily matter about talent, and I don't think that talent necessarily. I don't think it showed up. And your quarterback throws a bad pick early, right? Like all those things, kind of feed off each other. To you get killed, right, or whatever, 38-15. But the basis for that, it was Belichick had a real good plan that was better than the Browns' plan. His guys were able to execute it. Their run defense, right, limited what the Browns did from a run offense perspective, which better than anybody else has been able to do to them this year. You look at, well, man, why is Kevin Stefanski putting Jacoby Brissett in these situations, right? Why is he throwing deep on the second play of the game? And first of all, Pharaoh Brown was wide open. And, from the press box, how that view is. Judge, you can see it like the all-22, right? You can see kind of open up. He's open early, right? And I probably said, hey, geez, he's got to open. and Brissett waited too long to throw it, and then he underthrew it when he did. Now, we can argue whether or not that's a coaching problem. Why even ask your quarterback to do that? But, I mean, geez, they practice that play all week because it's scripted. It's the second play of the game. You got to trust your quarterback to make a play at some level. And that was a chance to make a big play, and your quarterback didn't do it. I don't put the bulk of that responsibility on Kevin Stefanski. Some people would argue with me. I don't. But my point is to juxtapose. Bill Belichick's got a rookie making his second start. That's a fourth-round draft pick out of Houston Baptist in Western Kentucky, and he threw it 34 times with this kid, and the kid was phenomenal because of everything else, right? Because they set up the run game, because the Browns were so devoted to stopping the run that he was getting one-on-one matchups that even a rookie quarterback could exploit. So part of that is coaching, right? That he put his guy in a chance to have success. And I'm not saying Stefanski didn't, because I think Stefanski put Brissett in some chances to have some success, and they didn't work, and it was on Jacoby Brissett. But my point is, he coached the game trusting his quarterback, or saying, hey, we're going to throw it 34 times, and even though they were winning, right? And he was able to make it work. And you flip it, and the Browns weren't able to make it work.
I got a couple directions I'm going to go with here, but another tweet I had, and it's funny. What you just said is what I felt too. I said the Patriots can plug in a quarterback named Bailey Zappi and no problem at all, full speed ahead. Then you have the other side of the story with the Browns. Like, I was just sitting there going, if we had Bailey Zappi, this would not be happening.
Right. I think that's a fair statement. And that goes back to your original point of Bill Belichick, right? He won that game. And it speaks to his greatness. Maybe it speaks to Kevin Stefanski's ineptitude. That feels a little strong, but whatever. The opposite of the greatness. And I think that's a really strong point. And that's where, to me, there's a million plays you can pick at, but where this game was decided, it certainly felt like a Belichick coaching staff won this game versus Kevin Stefanski coaching staff.
I'm going to make you think here for a minute, because your analysis, that analyzation you had before was just so awesome and spot on. But then you just said that part of why you thought they might win was because they're more talented than the Patriots, that the Browns have all this talent. So this goes back to what we've been talking about week after week. I always ask you, right? I mean, how many weeks have I've been asking you, how talented really is this team? So, right? Because we're sitting here going, you make a great point about, well, the front office is putting these players, and maybe they're not as good as they think they are. So we're being told they're talented, but are they? But yet, obviously, we see guys like Chubb and Garrett, and we know how talented they are, right? Yeah. Again, this is what confuses me this is the heart of the problem, and what confuses me about the 2022 Browns.
Yeah, I don't have I wish I had a great answer for this, Chud. I will say that the thing about football and NFL, the NFL, is all of it comes together, right? Like, it's not just one thing. So if you have better coaching, then the talent looks better, right? And it goes the other way around too. But like, you feel like if these pieces were there, let me rephrase it. And it goes back to your original point. I was thinking after the game, if you flipped coaching staffs yesterday or Sunday, right? I think the Browns win. And, Bill Belichick's probably the greatest ever. So, I don't know if that's a big indictment on Kevin Stefanski or not. But you're saying, okay, if you flip coaching staffs, the Browns would have beaten the Patriots, given the rosters, right? Which goes back to that whole, Billies and Joes versus X and O's or whatever. But I also think that if you flip quarterbacks, right? Like if you gave Bill Belichick Jacoby Brissett on Sunday and gave Kevin Stefanski Bailey Zappi on Sunday, I still think the Patriots will win. So again, that's a coaching organizational victory or, point versus a talent point, right? Like, so it's not just all about the talent. And I do think the Browns overall have the talent to compete with most teams in the league. And I think if you go player versus player with the Patriots, you give the Browns the advantage on a lot of levels. Amari Cooper is better than any receiver that the Patriots have. Tight ends are kind of a wash. The Patriots spent a ton of money on their tight ends. Browns spent a ton of money on David Njoku. The Browns' offensive line is better than the Patriots' offensive line. Matthew Judon and Myles Garrett are in the same ballpark. Garrett's probably better. Judon's having a great year, so whatever. They're the same. You could call it a wash if you want. He doesn't have. He's got a rookie playing corner. Like, there's just not a bunch of guys on that Patriots team. You go, oh my God, they're so good. But you look at the Browns, and whether it's high draft picks or whatever, we're around them, and you hear the hype, like you said. It just feels like the talent is still good enough, Chud. But I will say it doesn't. I don't think the talent's nearly as good as I thought, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I'll go back to Grant Delpit. I'll go to JOK, who didn't play a ton. Sione Takitaki played way more. I think it was 51 snaps to 33 snaps. And that's because they were trying to stop the run, and they know that JOK is not a great run defender. And, they thought that he would make up for it with his speed and his instincts. And that doesn't show up when you're getting run against 35 times a game. So you have to question. It goes back to that point where you start questioning everything, right? But you question the roster building and the team building. Like, okay, the Browns wanted to be real fast on defense, but does that matter if you can't stop the run, right? And if you're okay being young at defensive tackle, what happens when you get exposed at defensive tackle because teams run right down your throat? So I think the individual talent is there, but I think it's fair, especially during a 3-game losing streak, to question the roster construction because the weaknesses in the Browns, I think the Browns went in the season knowing that they had a chance for weaknesses at D tackle, right? They were going to be young, growing pains. Joe Wood said it. Same thing at receiver, right? We talked a million times about D tackle and receiver, and they weren't really addressed enough. And I think the Browns thought they could overcome that, and they haven't been able to, and therefore those areas of weakness have been exposed.
Wow, man, more great points. And this has been, we have really dove into this, and we have so much more to get to. So I think I got to put you before we get to the Ravens, because I got a bunch more questions here for you. But I'm gonna have to throw you on rapid fire. Can we finish? Can we finish talking about the Patriots on rapid fire?
Yep.
All right, so we'll go 25 seconds here. I gotta stay strong to this rapid fire because I just want your reaction to these thoughts. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Only 70 yards rushing, right?
Yeah. I get it. Nick Chubb needs more than 12 carries. I completely get it. I also know that the Patriots were focused on taking that away. They did a good job. The Browns tried to counter that by throwing, and it didn't work. So when it doesn't work, it looks like you should have run the ball more. And I get that, but I also think the Patriots did a good job against the run, and then the score got away from them. So I understand it's a topic. I don't think it should be as big a topic as it's been.
All right, Jacoby Brissett, I think he said, that they beat themselves. They need to get out of their own way. They have the right people in the locker room. I think that was all came from him. But his interception, boy, that it was almost like you just felt like when he threw that pick at the very beginning of the game, like, oh boy, here we go. Right? It's we're seeing clearly that he's a backup quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think when he was playing better early in the year, you felt like a regression was going to happen, right? You kind of play to your mean kind of thing. No, I don't think it's time to move to Josh Dobbs. I think Brissett showed you some stuff early in the season that gives you some confidence that he can play that way again. He can't throw the picks. It was a terrible pick. He threw a terrible pick against the Chargers at the end of that game. But I guess my point is he's not as good as he showed early. He's better than he showed against the Patriots. And I think you can win like that as long as he doesn't throw bad interceptions.
All right, I let you go longer on that one because that was going to be my next question was Josh Dobbs. So once you brought up his name, that just took away the question. I wanted to get your thoughts on that because I heard that a lot on the radio so far this week. Special teams.
Oh, geez. Not good enough, right? Cade York makes 3 field goals, so you feel better about that if you're the Browns. But Chester Rogers, who's supposed to be this veteran and stabilize the return game, muffs the punt, leads to a touchdown. They have a chance to recover that onside kick, and I know it's a tough spot for AJ Green to be in, but you can't have your feet out of bounds to touch the ball. And if he doesn't, the Browns recover, and then maybe they score, and maybe we're talking about this game completely differently. Not even that they win, but maybe the final score is 24-21, and that feels different, right? Than 38-15. So
yeah.
I don't know how much blame to put on Green, except that was a huge play in the game that he screwed up.
Yeah. How about when they went for 2 there late in the game? Do you agree with going for 2 there, or do you kick the extra point?
You know what, Chud? I've listened to the analytics, and now I'm okay doing that. It took me a long time to get there because I like being 1 score down. To me, mentally, you're better, right? You feel like you're in the game. The other team coaches differently because it's a 1-score game. But I understand that that's just the way it is analytically is, hey, we want to know exactly where we stand. So if you need to get 2 points, go for it first. So therefore, you know how to play out the rest of the game. So I've just given up that fight, I guess. I understand it. That's the way it's going to be.
But my question is, if you kick the extra point and you make it, right? Yeah. Don't you know where you stand there as well?
Well, no. I mean, I get what you're saying. The analytical argument is that you're going to have to get 2 at some point. So, and because 2 is harder than the extra point, right? Going for 2 is harder than the extra point. You need to know if you got that 2 points as early as possible. Because then you need to know, because the argument is, then you need to know whether or not the onside kick was 6.5 minutes left, right? Versus if you're down by 8 points, you think it's a 1-score game. But if you miss that 2-point conversion late, then there's nothing you can do about it. And the point is, if you miss the 2-point conversion early, then you can try to play catch up. That's the argument. Yeah. You're not going to – that's what the analytical argument is, and you have most of the teams, if not all the teams in the league, doing that. So I've come to grips with it, but I completely understand the point of, hey, let's keep it a 1-score game as long as possible. That makes sense to me, but nobody in the analytical world will have that argument. They're completely on the other side.
Right. Quickly, Myles Garrett gets the sack record, and how's his health?
Yeah, I mean, he says he's going to keep playing. That shoulder that he sprained in the car accident was bugging him, and then it really bugged him in the fourth quarter. It showed up after that second sack of his. He's going to gut it through. He's committed to playing as long as he's able to. He's committed to playing. He won't be 100%. Maybe coming out of the bye is when he'll be able to be 100% again, hopefully. But, I know I'm going to run over. People criticize Myles Garrett like he didn't have an impact the other day. He had 2 sacks and a forced fumble. It's not his fault the Browns were stuffed on 4th and 1 and didn't get a first down there. If they score a touchdown, that's a huge play in the game. He did his part, and there's plenty of games where you can criticize Myles Garrett. I don't think Sunday was one of them.
Okay, where are we at injury-wise?
Well, we don't know about Clowney, right? It's going to be week to week. He says he's not playing until he feels right, and I don't know if it'll be this week or not. As of Monday, Denzel Ward was still in the concussion protocol. We'll find out more later, either today, when we're taping this Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. Concussions are tough. I don't think there's any reason to say yes, he's automatically going to be back this week. And Wyatt Teller, calf strain, MRI results probably today. He missed 3 games, I think, a couple years ago with the calf strain. Hopefully he doesn't have to miss time because we know he's such a key piece of that offensive line.
Little Deshaun Watson news this week, right?
Yeah. Back in the building last week, I think we mentioned that. Roger Goodell at the owners' meetings on Tuesday said he's on schedule to meet all the benchmarks of that settlement, right? Going to, getting evaluated, going to treatment, going to sessions, however you want to phrase it. So he's on schedule as long as he keeps it up to fulfill the requirements of the suspension and come back and play December 4th.
All right. Ready to get onto the Ravens?
Yes, sir.
Well, if we were doing the Ravens Zone podcast, I think the lead story would be, why can we not win these games when we build these leads? I mean, they led almost every game, and they're 3-3.
I think they've had double-digit leads in every game. I think I saw that stat, right? So it reminds me some of the Browns, right? The Browns, until the Patriots game, had led every game into the fourth quarter. So I know people in Baltimore think they should be way better than their record, and I get that. I really didn't. Obviously, they're not, and your record is what your record is. But I think they've played better than 3-3, and I think that should be concerning for the Browns and their fans. You can't look at this team and go, "Oh, they're a 3-3 team." They're good. I watched the last two games. I went back and watched the last two games, and they beat the Bengals at the end, and then they lose to the Giants at the end. And Lamar made a couple of bad plays at the end of that Giants game, and that's not bad luck. That's bad quarterback play. But he's also, played really well at times and made good throws and whatever. So my point is, they're a talented team. The Browns are going to need to play a really good game to beat the Ravens, and you cannot count on the Ravens falling apart again in the fourth quarter. Like, that's not the recipe. Is, well, we'll just hang around and then they're going to give us the game. I would not count on that. John Harbaugh's too good a coach. Lamar Jackson's too good a quarterback.
How would you say Lamar's been playing from a fantasy standpoint? I know he's been really good. From an NFL quarterback standpoint, I haven't studied or watched him enough to really break it down. Have you watched him enough to really dive into him?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the last two games. So I watched the win over Cincy and the loss to the Giants. I went back and watched every snap of those. He looks like Lamar. He still runs it great. I think teams have figured out when he's dropping back to pass, it doesn't feel like he has the same huge play scrambling. I think rushes do a better job of containing him. But when they go with designed runs with him, whether it's option or zone read or just straight up quarterback runs, he's still electric. I think this is the way he's been throughout his career as a passer, and I think he's gotten better as a passer. He makes some unbelievable throws, and the Browns have seen that, right? Unbelievable throws. And then he'll make some bad throws where he misfires badly. And if that leads to an interception, it leads to an interception, or it's a bad incompletion. Like, I think it was a Giants game. I watched him back to back, so they kind of blur. There were two short yardage plays, and the Giants put a bunch of guys on the line of scrimmage. And Lamar missed guys deep downfield where they had a chance for 14 points. He just missed them. So you need that to happen, right? The Browns can't. If Lamar has a game where he completes 75% of his passes or 70% of his passes, the Browns have a really tough time winning that game because that means the Ravens are going to score a ton of points. So you need Lamar to miss some key throws. You need to figure out a way to limit what Mark Andrews does because it feels like every other throw from Lamar goes to Mark Andrews. And then you got to hope that Lamar doesn't kill you on the ground too. So I think he's playing at a high level. I know that the contract that he doesn't have, right, that extension that he still doesn't have, weighs over everything in Baltimore. I talked to some media member yesterday in Baltimore, and they said it's just like sucking out all the oxygen. But during the game, he still looks like Lamar to me.
So I'm looking on Twitter right now. I don't want to quote anyone necessarily, but I've seen 3 different tweets about this, and the only thing that I see a difference is the amount of games. But I've seen it written twice that the amount of teams in NFL history to hold a double-digit lead in each of its first 6 games, there's 39. Of those 39 teams, only one does not have a winning record, and that's the Ravens.
Right, so it's double-digit leads at some point in the game. Right, yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible.
It is. It shows you how talented they are, right? That they're able to take double-digit leads, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, remember that one they lost to the Dolphins? I mean, they just that was epic meltdown.
Right. They had, against the I'm going to lose it now. It was before the Bengals game. They had a chance to go in. Was it Buffalo? They had a chance to beat Buffalo, and they went for a touchdown instead of kicking a field goal to take a 3-point lead. And then Buffalo goes down and wins the game, right? You can point to about 4 plays, and even in the game Sunday against the Giants, they had a 3rd and 1 with 3 minutes left, and they get a legal lineman. They weren't lined up properly. They converted. They wound up going 3rd and 6, and then Lamar, it's a snap that he wasn't ready for, bounces away, he picks it up, and he scrambles and throws a terrible interception. But if they convert 3rd and 1, which just means they have a receiver covering the tackle, right? The game's probably over. So they could easily be better than the record.
They beat the Jets 24-9 in week 1, lost to the Dolphins 42-38 in week 2. That's the one I mentioned. They beat the Patriots 37-26. So there's a comparison to what just happened to the Browns. Lost to the Bills 23-20. Beat the Bengals 19-17.
Yeah.
That was that
last
wild game. Sure. That was the wild one, I think. And then they lost to the Giants 24-20.
I mean, they could honestly, God, they could be easily, obviously, with that stat, easily be 6-0, really easily be 5-1. So, you know, I'm just saying, anybody taking solace in the fact that they're 3-3, you can't. This is going to be a really difficult game for the Browns, and I think the fact that they're a touchdown underdog drives home that point.
Yeah. I mean, maybe on a positive note, maybe they'll be looking ahead to the Buccaneers the next week. I don't know. There's something to be said there. I don't know. How about the Ravens defense? And if you mentioned it, I apologize. I was looking up that stat.
No, I mean, I don't think they're the same old Ravens defense. You know, they got Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters still at corner. I don't think they're the same players they used to be. Although Peters, I thought I saw a really good stat about him. You know, they had a really good game. They got a rookie at safety out of Notre Dame. They don't have the huge names that they used to, but I'm telling you, watching these two games, it still looked to me like they got a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And they've always been good against the run. So, I don't think they're the dominant Ravens defense from, years ago, but they still look pretty good to me. So, yeah, they're just a solid team. So they just are. J.K. Dobbins is, his knee tightened up on him last week, so he didn't play a lot. And then the backup comes in and was great. And I'm blanking on his name right now. It's number 17. And he was really good. So
Drake?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he was great. Kenyon Drake, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's explosive and fast, so they just have some pieces. Now, they're not explosive in the pass game with their receiving core. Right? Rashad Bateman is hurt. He may come back this week. He's like their number one guy. And a lot of it falls on Mark Andrews. So you think, okay, if you take away the tight end, you have a chance. Because they don't, they don't have Marquise Brown anymore. And, Duvernay does some stuff for him. But, they're not like a hugely complete roster, but you don't need to be when you have the playmaker Lamar is, the run game, and then you got a tight end like Mark Andrews.
Scott, I have Mark Andrews in the ACI, the Adam Kaplan Invitational, which I told you about a few weeks ago on this podcast. That National League, John Hansen, the guru. Right. I'm 5-1 right now in first place in that league. A big part of that is because of Andrews.
I mean, it's a billion balls, man.
Yeah, so had to brag a little bit there, only because it's a national. And I'll also tell you about my losses. I'm in a league with my daughter. And I'm 1-5. So, it happens. I got in too many leagues this year. I'm usually a one league guy. And
right.
I don't too many leagues. It's hard,
thin, man.
Yeah. And then you're rooting for guys that you need to do, good in one league and bad in the other, right?
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Anything else before we get to prediction time?
No, I just want one thing real quick. It's been kind of bugging me the last couple of days. Like, I get the reaction to the NFL, and I love it, right? I love the hyper focus and the overreaction. But sometimes it weighs on me, right? Like, I get that the Browns are in a 3-game losing streak, and that's awful. And I talked about all the issues, right? It's not like I'm ignoring any of those. But I do think it's fascinating that when an NFL team loses, right, all the good stuff that happens is like erased. Nobody talks about it. It's, Myles Garrett could have 4 sacks, but if it comes in a loss, he's part of the problem. And then if you win, you ignore all the bad stuff that happens, right? Not as a coach, but as a fan base or some media. And I think it's fascinating, but I also think it's, not the right way to look at it, right? Like you have to be able to have some perspective. Like just because you lose a game doesn't mean the world's ending. Just because this happened doesn't mean this happened, And I think and I get it, like I understand where it comes from. But you get in the middle of a 3-game losing streak, and we talked about it earlier. Like you do feel like everything's the problem, and everything might be the problem, but it might not be, right? Like there might be things that can be fixed. You might be able to settle things down. One win changes everything, right? So I just kind of want to straddle that line between having the proper reaction and overreaction. And I think it's tough, and I get it, but I just kind of want to throw that out there because I think some of the reaction has been over the top. And I would even throw, not that the idea of playing Josh Dobbs is ridiculous, because I understand where it comes from. But Jacoby Brissett, until he threw that bad pick against the Chargers, I thought he played really well. So he plays a bad 63 minutes. Does that mean Josh Dobbs is a better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett? I just think sometimes you need to take a breath and say, okay, I need to see more before I'm making a decision, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think in the Brissett case, it's just a matter of, he's just a better quarterback when he comes into a game as a backup, or he's only, I just think to stretch him out through an entire. I'm not making a case for Dobbs by any means. Right. I'm just saying, I think what's happening to Brissett is, maybe there's more. I mean, there's plenty of film on him from the past. I'm trying to figure out how to say it. I just feel like as the season goes on, it's more difficult for any backup quarterback to have success.
Yeah, that's completely correct, Chud. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, and I love your point, and I agree with it. I think we mentioned this a couple podcasts ago. Now, I'm making sure I remember this. Wasn't it the Chargers game where if York's field goal, that was the Chargers game, right?
Yeah.
Our podcast would have been completely different if that field goal goes in, right?
Correct.
And you and I have been doing this together since 2008, 2007.
Yes,
I mean, you come on the show on Sunday nights, and of course, Browns Tonight, Sports Tonight, whatever we called the show on Channel 3, that show would have been produced completely different based on a win or a loss. Right. You're right. And how you look at the topics and just a field goal being the difference of a win or a loss is how you look at that game. And you break it down like, well, if this would have happened, they would have won, or if this would have happened, maybe they. All right, how about this? When they lose, you look at all of the little things that would have made them win. But when they win, you don't break down all the little things that would have made them lose, right?
Yeah, it's like when your team gets a bad roughing the passer call, you go nuts. But when your team benefits from it, nobody says a word, right? And I get it. I get it. That's perspective, and it's the way of the world. And it's one of the things I love about the NFL, because then you have this passion, right? And you have this. Which is why people listen to the podcast, people watch you on TV, people read the stuff, right? Like people call on the radio. It's all because of the passion. And I really love that. I'm just saying sometimes, a little perspective isn't the worst thing.
Yeah. Well, just look at the Guardians here. My wife and I were talking last night, like Naylor with Rockin' That Baby.
Right.
Like everyone's like, not everyone, but I guess the thought is, oh, you hate the Yankee fans because they're doing that. I thought it was actually pretty funny that they did it. And Naylor put it upon himself, right? But I think that's what makes it kind of fun. Just like Yankees fans hate the SpongeBob song and Cleveland fans are loving it, right? I mean,
and especially if Naylor's up for it, which he is. Like he said, he thought it was cool. So it wasn't like it didn't come from we're going to start fighting,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, from that aspect, I agree. I like that too.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I like that topic. So, all right,
got that off my chest. You want to pick the game here?
Yeah, no, I love that you threw that out there. So, man, this has been a great podcast. We got a lot in. So now it's prediction time. I think I went first. Oh, well, first of all, I've been working so hard to catch you because I've been behind you all year, but guess what? We're all tied up now, 3-3.
I know.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about last week. I'm just going to flat out tell you. I was pretty confident in that pick. Now, I wouldn't have been surprised if the Browns won, just like you picked the Browns, but you're not surprised they lost. No. I know that. And you said that. And we've kind of mentioned that in different games. But I felt pretty confident in the Patriots pick for a couple of reasons. Number one, what they did to them last year. Number two, the coaching. And number three, after I picked them to beat Atlanta, I decided I was not going to pick them again in a game where I felt they might lose until they win again and show me they can win again. That's where I turned how I'm predicting them. And I'm like, I regretted that Falcons pick. And then that's another reason why I went. And I needed to do that just to tie you up.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it, and I'm actually, Chud, I'm going to make my pick here. I'm going to steal something from you. I can't. I don't know if I can pick them again until they win a game. And it could happen Sunday, right? Like they could go into Baltimore and win. Like that's not the craziest thing in the world, but it's an uphill battle, right? I talked about how good I thought Baltimore was. That's a tough place to win. I've been there a bunch of times. I'm going to go Sunday. It's a tough place to win. Lamar Jackson is really good. and the Browns have to figure out a way to get out of this funk, and I think that's really tough to do, and it puts a lot of pressure on the coaching staff, a lot of pressure on the players. I think the sense of urgency obviously is there. We talked about Jack Conklin saying you have to have a playoff mindset. Like, I believe the Browns are there. Like, they're going to give their effort and they know that they need to win this game. But it just feels like there's a lot of stuff to correct, and this is a tough team to have to correct it against. And they would probably rather have the bye this week than 2 weeks from now, because the season could be like I talked about at the beginning. The season could be, gotten away from them if they lose the next 2 games before the bye week. So, having said all that, I would be stunned if the Browns won, but I certainly can't pick them given the recent struggle. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to go closer than the line. I'm going to go Baltimore 23, Cleveland 20.
23-20. Okay. All right. Yeah, I agree with you. You gotta see them win again before you can pick them, I think. I think the recipe for a Browns win is simply run the ball and get time of possession. You got to keep the ball out of Lamar's hands. The time a Browns victory, I think, would be a time of possession discrepancy that's just huge, right? And Brissett doesn't make any interceptions that cost them. They just run the ball. They keep it a little low scoring, and somehow the Browns defense does a 180 and just shocks us and has like the game of the year. That's the recipe for a Browns win, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I'm not calling for it though. No. And I'm going to go 27-17. Okay. I'm going to go a 10-point gap. It could be 20-17 late in the game, and then you have that crazy touchdown that just so then people who had the Browns plus 6.5, they don't get the cover. So because it is 6.5, over under is I think 45.5.
Okay.
So I'm going 27-17 Ravens.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you said that about the recipe, because I'm with you. I think it is. You got to run the ball a bunch, and the Ravens are going to make it tough. Saquon Barkley did not have a big game. He had some runs, last week against the Giants, but it didn't. It looked like the Ravens were trying to take him away, and they did a pretty good job. And I think that's similar to what they're going to try to do against the Browns and Nick Chubb. But yeah, that's the way to do it for the Browns, right? Control the clock, maybe make a couple of big plays, but dominate possession. They had 4 turnovers last year in Baltimore and weren't able to win the game. If they could get a couple more, which they've been terrible at, they've only got 5 takeaways all year. If that's what could flip this, right? That's how you turn around a 3-game winning streak. You get on a streak where you get takeaways, you don't turn it over, and all of a sudden that's how you can win a couple games you're not favored to win. So that is the recipe. I'm not confident in predicting that recipe to be executed. So, well, Chud, I got to go to Berea. This was a fun podcast. I really appreciate it, buddy. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll do this again next week. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks, Chud. Thanks, everybody.